Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And seeing as many of my colleagues, interestingly more on this side of the House, are fond of quoting Lenin these days, there is a, like my honourable friend, the Right Honourable Member for Halton, Price and Howden, there's a quote from Lenin, I think, which is something along the lines of history needs a push. And it does feel that the march of history, regrettably, by the actions of Vladimir Putin, have given us a push. They've given this economic crime bill a push. But it is important that we bear in mind the thoughts of the excellent speech of my colleague, the member for Amber Valley, that this legislation is here for the long term. This is not dependent on what is going on in the Ukraine, regrettable though that is. Some of the actions the government have rightly taken is temporary, and it is designed to deal with the Ukrainian issue. This is long-term, and there's been a lot of people on both sides of the House who have worked for that, and we need to bear that in mind as we legislate. First of all, on the register of overseas entities, these proposed requirements will not, in my view, disincentivise honest investors into the British market. We are a place that's open for business, we're pro-business, but we want clean money, and I think this bill completely bears that in mind and does the right thing. I also want to push back on some colleagues who've suggested that somehow we need to, from the opposition amendment for 28 days for the register of overseas entities to be set up. All of us want this to happen as soon as possible, but I fear that many in the House are underestimating the challenge of turning Companies House, and we've heard lots of sort of war stories about various things at Companies House that are not as we would like, and I would agree with those, but underestimating the challenge of turning Companies House from effectively an administrative office into something like a quasi-regulator. That is hard, it will take time. And there are those who say, well, you should legislate anyway and force them to do it quickly. Well, yes, we could. We could force them to do it tomorrow. But then the next day, when our constituents and the media and various other people say, why is the government, why is Parliament not enforcing the law that itself has passed? Well, the reason would be that we weren't ready, we weren't capable of doing it through Companies House. So I think that 6 months, and to some degree these things are arbitrary, but I think 6 months is a fair time period in order to do those things. But of course, I will listen carefully in the committee stage for what the Minister says from the Treasury bench. A couple of technical points for the Minister. The first, in focusing on the holding and transferring of qualifying interest in land in order to trigger, almost as a trigger point for this bill, does the bill capture sales of property-owning companies, i.e. share sales, not asset sales? I think that's one point that should be cleared up. The second, does the bill cater for nominee arrangements, which could allow the purpose of the overseas register to be quite easily evaded? Again, that would just be a very interesting point that the Minister could clarify. In relation to the Office of Financial Sanctions, this has come up a little bit so far. The really important thing and good thing that this bill does is it moves us from a position whereby the office can only impose penalties if an individual knew or had reasonable cause to know or suspect that sanctions would be breached. This moves us to a strict liability position, i.e., if the sanctions are breached, you can be fined. I think that is the right approach. I think it's overdue, and I commend the government for doing so. But just to finish, it's really important. I speak as somebody who's formerly in the City of London, both as a lawyer and a banker, as an advisor and in a bank. I think it's really important the City of London helps this House, helps the government take a lead here. The world is looking at the city to see if they can put these things in place in a cooperative way, and I mean that everybody from the institutions and advisors and everybody else, because morals and markets need not and should not be mutually exclusive. And I think that is of absolute critical importance. And to finish, now, we're all politicians, indeed we're all human beings, though those two things are not always mutually exclusive. And there are very heightened tensions in this House and across the country. Whilst we legislate, we have to bear in mind the rule of law. When we talk about dealing with seizures of assets, that is a serious business. That should never be done on a whim. This government, I think, with this bill and the other measures, has struck the right balance between doing what we need to do, but also making sure that we are seen as sensible, proportionate, and within the rule of law, because without that, then we lose everything. Thank you.